Hi, everybody. This is your cousin Brucey. And you're listening to the Fab Four Free for All with Mitch Axelrod, Rob Leonard, and Tony Triguado.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Fab Four Free for All, the Beatles video and audio podcast on the internet that we used to say was weekly, and now it's sort of whenever the heck we want it to be.
It's weekly in our minds.
It's weekly in our minds, right? That's very good.
Yes, we record this very weekly.
Oh,
I have dreams that we're doing shows while I'm sleeping.
Oh, that's
why I fall asleep during this show.
That's scary. Nice.
Hopefully our audience doesn't fall asleep.
No.
Well, as you can hear, there's often some frivolity here. And I'm your host, Tony Triguado. I'm being joined by, as I always am, by my dear friends, Mr. Mitch Axelrod.
Hey, everybody.
And Mr. Rob Leonard.
Hello, all.
And the topic this week is, or this episode is one that we know is probably near and dear to the hearts of a lot of the folks who listen to the show on a regular basis. And we, of course, all, if you're listening to this, you're a fan of the music of the Beatles. But there is that crossover point where it goes from being a fan to being a collector. So we're going to look at some of the different facets of collecting and our personal involvement with collecting the Beatles and how we came upon it. And I think that's a really good place to start. We all, obviously, three of us are all obviously fans of the music, or we wouldn't be here. But what I was thinking was, when did you start enjoying the music? And then when did it get to a point that you found yourself collecting the music? Now, Mitch had a point, because Mitch is sort of more of a first generation collector. So anyway, so Mitch, when did you start with the music, and when did it,
Well, as everybody knows, I started with the music when I was 2. So the music hit me right away. As far as when is the crossover, when we're listening to the music and the Beatles put out a new record every few months, no way the 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 7-year-old said, wow, you're a collector. You're just buying the music at that point. And I think that's, I think there's a point later in time when you, quote, become the collector. Although, as I've discussed with you offline, Tony and Rob, I think there's a fine line between music and the memorabilia, the ephemera, the magazine.
Oh, sure.
So
sure. But we all started with the music, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. But, we also started buying, 16 magazine.
There you go.
Or the Beatles Invade New York, or the Beatles versus Dave Clark 5 magazine on the stands. But at that point in your life, were you a collector? Yes, but you were not a self-proclaimed collector. Everybody else probably thought of you like my parents probably thought of me as a collector, because now I'm collecting magazines and such, and the music. But it's only in the last like 20 years, I would say, or 15 years even, that the music became something to collect. Because, now we're getting like, in my eyes, because now we're getting like archive releases and this and that. So now it's a collector's edition. They call it that now. So on something. So
on everything. Back then
they weren't calling the White Album the collector's edition. They were
but I'm talking about magazines, or you talk about magazines. Nowadays, usually something happens and then they say collector's edition, because they know people like us are going to go and buy it.
Right. Yeah.
Or worse, someone we know, whether it's family or friends, will get it for us thinking we need it.
Right. But you just brought up a great point, Rob, and Tony had this, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later. Rob, your point of wanting it versus needing it is going to come up in this show. That's a great point.
So in a way, it's sort of, and to get to, up with your story next, Rob, it's that idea. I think what Mitch is or what you're alluding to is the idea that we sort of go from accruing to collecting? Like it's sort of, because
it's not called collecting. Like I would never call going into a music store and picking a picture sleeve of the Beatles. I wouldn't say I'm collecting this. I'm buying it to listen to the music.
All right. At the time, you're saying.
At the time.
Okay. So, Rob, go ahead. So how did it?
Actually, I'm not a huge collector per se. I like the music. It started for me, of course, with Wings Over America, though I was just thinking about this just minutes ago. Yellow Submarine, when I was 6 years old, the movie had come out. I still remember people singing to the chorus, at least in the hallway at my school. And there was a lot of stuff, there were lunchboxes and various other things, which of course I got none of that. I wasn't a Beatles fan and my parents didn't know to buy it. And I probably would have, let's say I got the lunchbox because I had a Harlem Globetrotters lunchbox, which got destroyed several times, because I
did too.
Because of the cartoon. I love the cartoon. So if I had a Beatles Yellow Submarine lunchbox from 1969, I'm sure it would have been hanging out with the Harlem Globetrotters one, which is somewhere in the
landfill.
The landfill in Oceanside or something, or Long Beach, whichever one you want to choose. So I didn't really start collecting. I remember there was a magazine called The Beatles Are Back.
Oh yeah.
It came out in like 78. Yep. And I was just starting to get into
different versions of that.
Yeah. And I think they re-put it out when John died or was murdered.
Yeah.
So, I started, I started collecting and because I'm in radio, it intrigued me. And Tony, you're in radio too. Sorry, Mitch, but you're a collector of records. So when I first got hired at WHPC Radio in 1983, they had a wall of 45s. Now, no one used them. And I was like, wow. And they had like mono and stereo on both sides on most of these singles. And I'm like, wow, look at this. And then when I worked at WGBB, they had older versions of those singles. Maybe they didn't have mono stereo because in the 60s they didn't do that. But those are like the two places where I said, hey, these have been left behind. Maybe I should, borrow them or put them into my collection. And with the Beatles stuff, I did.
Have them go where they are more loved.
Yeah, that's right. Well, eventually they threw all the singles away at our station. And part of it was my doing because I took the Beatles stuff, but we got rid of the rest of it because we had it on vinyl. We had it on an LP. So why save the 45, which I found out later was a mistake.
But did you consider yourself a collector then?
No, I'm not like, what I would like? I'd like some reissues of some of the stuff from 64 and 65. The Beatles Flip Your Wig game. I would love to have a reprint of that.
Okay, but that's ephemera. But let me toss this out to you, though, Rob. Once you get Wings Over America,
right?
Is it a conscious effort to start going backwards? Because to me,
yes.
So arguably, I think once you start going backwards and you're not accruing as things come out, because after Wings Over America is going to be what? London Town,
which I bought.
Right. And then after London Town is Back to the Egg. But did you start pursuing I'm now going to go get Band on the Run and maybe Venus and Mars and maybe?
No. I actually, Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl came out in May of 77.
Yeah.
I got the Wings Over America in April. And, the 75, 76, 77 was the 3 years of the live album,
rock and
a lot of
music, love songs.
Yeah, a lot. Well, I'm not talking about Beatles. I'm talking about the live album. So you have, Frampton was the big one.
Yeah, right.
Kiss Alive.
And Alive too.
Alive too. Budokan for Cheap Trick was 79, but that's sort of, the last one of that era. No, but I don't really collect things like Mitch. I think collects things. I would consider
certain things.
Yeah,
we'll get to that later. But
but like I said, if I can find a Flip Your Wig game that was a reprint, I'd be happy because I don't want to pay $200 for it or whatever the going price is on eBay. And that's part of the thing. I mean, part of it is I have no connection to it, though I think it's kind of a cool thing, the box and the, I hear it takes like less than 20 minutes to actually play it from beginning to end. But I would like to have that. I'd like to have the talcum powder, just to say, when you come into my bathroom, you'd see the Beatles talcum powder,
So when you think of the idea of you're not going to go try to pursue any of these originals. If one falls in your lap, you'd be ecstatic. But
yes,
you're not going to pursue it. So where would you say that it? Like I say, a new McCartney album comes out, but there's a single with a B-side that's not on the album. Do you need to go get the single?
I probably didn't know it at that time when I first started. I probably because well, at that time, let's see, With a Little Luck didn't have a B-side that was separate.
No.
Yeah. Maybe I'm Amazed didn't.
Again, if it's of the period, are you collecting?
All right. Well, but I don't know. I think that's that line crossing. If you're going out to get the single because you love With a Little Luck, With a Little Luck's a bad example. If you go out and buy Helen
actually,
Wheels,
that's a good example.
Well, but there is no B-side. I'm talking about something with a non-LP B-side.
Come on, people.
Okay. So if you're going, going back even earlier, you're going to go buy Helen Wheels because I hear Helen Wheels on the radio. I love it. And you're never in your life going to play the B-side, even though the B-side's not on the album.
Then you're a collector.
No. See, I think the opposite. I think if you go and you get it and you get it home and you go, oh, look, there's a song I've never heard. And it's not on the album. The album comes out.
I thought you just said you were never going to play the B-side, but you had to have it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right.
Then you're a collector.
Too. That's a collector too.
But a lot of times you get the B-side and you listen to it and it's like, okay, that's not bad.
But you didn't buy it to collect it. You didn't buy it just to have it. You bought it to have it to listen to.
Yeah.
Like you didn't buy it. Like you didn't go and say, I'm going to have every McCartney 45 from every release.
No.
Then you're a collector. But if you bought it because you said, again, if it's a non-LP B-side.
So are you saying that you can't be a quote collector if you're just in for the music?
No, I'm not. It's a gray area.
It's a hard line.
It's a fine line.
It's a fine line.
But I understand what you're talking about. But I think if you have to know that the B-side isn't going to end up, and they never tell you that. And also, when you mentioned With a Little Luck, there was a radio edit,
of course,
many stations played, which was on Wingspan,
right.
And you might be looking for that version and hear the long version. And you got to remember, when I was 14, I didn't buy the LPs first because I wanted to hear it. Back then, radio played the actual tracks from it, but I might buy the single first because I've heard that. With a Little Luck, I heard a lot. I heard an edited version. I heard the long version.
I had a friend who, when I was young, bought the Band on the Run single and was really pissed off because it was too long.
Yeah.
He was used to the AM version, and what's this with about rabbits? Like, what is that?
And the AM version was horrible edit.
Right, it's terrible edit. But if that's what people knew.
Yeah, but you're right. That's what people would know.
Yeah, for
many
me,
cases.
I started with inheriting a couple of singles from my sister and her friends and stuff. But I gotten All I Need Is Love back with Baby You're a Rich Man, and I still to this day get off on seeing the orange yellow swirl label of Baby You're a Rich Man. When I got a new set of speakers, one of the first things I threw on was the 45 of Baby You're a Rich Man, just here, and I had I Want to Hold Your Hand, so I was standing there. But the thing that I think for me, like I could actually look at and say, flip the switch from a person who liked the music to collector, was the insert that came with 62 to 66 and 67, 70.
Yeah, no,
that's when it all went wrong for me, because you pulled out this insert and it listed all of the Beatles albums and all of the Beatles singles.
Yeah, no.
And there it was, like a checklist almost.
Yeah. Oh, no, it was.
It was a challenge to a lot of people.
It was a challenge. And that was, to me, was like, okay, the gauntlet's been thrown,
even if some of it was incorrect.
Even though some of it was incorrect, like Thingamabob. I mean, really? Yeah. But I think, it then also started to go beyond the music. So for any now, Rob, you're saying it never really sort of went too far beyond the music for you. Magazines, stuff like that.
A couple of magazines, but then I started by Beatle bootlegs.
And there you go. So that's what I was going to ask.
And that's the other step. There's it's like you're coming up to a divide, And you say, okay, I really like this band. Oh, look, there's this live album called Five Nights in the Judo Arena. What's that about?
All right.
Oh, what's back in '64 at the Hollywood Bowl? What is that about? And all of a sudden, you're walking down that path a little bit, especially in '77, '78, when there wasn't a lot of bootlegs to begin with.
No.
And so I think I followed that path a little more. And then I found the Washington, D.C. show, which was a horrible pressing that I actually mailed away for because there were ads in the back of Rolling Stone magazine, for someplace. It was someplace in North Carolina.
North Carolina, Pied Piper Records.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it was Pied Piper, but
Pied Piper was the big
probably
one in North Carolina.
But that's so there's you sort of can get that split in the road, and you're like, okay, and then you're like, okay, oh look, another one, and then you start getting intrigued by it because, well, how'd they come out?
Where they come from?
Yeah,
they're not listed in 62 to 66 and 67,
they're not.
70.
So Rob, if you're buying bootlegs, then you are a collector, right?
I guess I would be, but not. I didn't think of it that way. I thought of it as I never thought of it as a collecting thing. But like I like Billy Joel, but I don't think any bootlegs. I have some tapes, but I don't have records of bootlegs.
But it comes back to that idea of do we have like, okay, so Mitch, will jump over. You went beyond the music in a couple of areas.
Well, I went beyond the music. I had Beatle cards, but again, while you're doing it of the period, I'm not considering that a collector. Well, it's funny because now, if I want to go out and get Beatle cards at the age of 60, then guess what? I'm collecting them. That, to me, I think age has a lot to do with it. I think also, like it's weird because the Rolling Stones are still a viable entity, right? A band.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess if I'm buying Rolling Stone bubblegum cards, I'm collecting that. But if I'm buying the current Rolling Stones album, now I'm not collecting their music unless I go, like you said, Tony, go back in the past, and I want to get like 12 by 5 or whatever. So that's a different story. It's so weird because I never considered records as a quote collecting thing until I got older or until the Beatles ceased to exist as a band. Because when they ceased to exist as a band, then they weren't putting out any new products. So anything I bought was going back in the past to collect.
All right. So does peer involvement have anything to do with it? Where I'm going with this is I had peers by the time I got to 5th and 6th grade, for instance, and I had neighbors, shout out to my neighbors who, when I lived in Manor Haven, were fellow Beatles fans.
Mm-hmm.
And my friend Barry was the first time I saw it back in 64 at the Hollywood Bowl, and I was maybe all of 8 but I needed to have it. I had to have it,
Of course.
But does peer involvement change it from I just like stuff to because what's someone going to say to you? Well, how big is your collection? Well, what do you have? How many things do you have? How many albums do you have?
I didn't have any. None of my friends were really Beatle fans. So,
but did any of them collect music though?
No.
Really?
Matter of fact, my friend Bob, when he got CDs for all his vinyl, he gave me all his vinyl. And about a year ago, he gave me all the CDs from the vinyl he doesn't have, and now he doesn't need the CDs because he has Spotify.
But that's different though, because that's just format changes.
No, but I know that, but that he didn't care about the music as much because he can get it on Spotify. That's to him. Okay. That's all that matters.
Okay, so he wasn't holding dear to anything that was a physical format.
No, it wasn't like he bought this at Corvettes or he bought it at Sam Goodies. And
we can remember
memory, or there's a sticker on the album that's still there from 1980 or something, which I've done. I've gone to my record stores, and if there has a Corvette sticker on it, like an F or a G, I buy it if it's $1. Just with a sticker.
That's funny.
That's funny because Tony, when I was in,
am I a collector there? Or am I just wasting my money?
I think
a little of both. I mean, really, doesn't that kind of anyway? So
when I was in elementary school, I remember a kid named Hank. He had Hollywood Bowl album, and I said, "What's that?" Because I was already into the Beatles. What's that? And he said, "Oh, I got it at this record store in Syosset, where I grew up." And I had to then go to that record store and that's where I found for $2.99 all my bootlegs.
You had
So
to say
that's collecting.
swordfish. You had to say swordfish and be allowed back behind it anyway.
Well, no, I just had to say, here's my money.
Here's my $2.99.
But that made me a collector because a lot of those I didn't even listen to in the beginning. I just thought the covers were cool because they were different, even though they were garbage. I mean, we all know what the original bootlegs look like, and the foldovers, and they were just horrible.
Xeroxes.
Right. But I mean, Studio Sessions 2 or 1 were the Beatles on the Beach from Help. I've never seen that cover, and I'm like, wow, I have to have it. So did I ever play it? Yes, maybe once, and then put it away. So I collected.
John singing "Honey Don't," man. John.
I know. It was cool. Renaissance Minstrels was cool, but because Renaissance Minstrels had the third one, I think, had solo stuff. So I love that, but again, I didn't consider myself a collector because it was music. I still have a hard time deciphering whether collecting is music until like now. So when you said like the ephemera, I had the bubblegum cards. I had the Yellow Submarine lunchbox, Rob, which I beat to shit because, whatever. I was how old? 7, 5, whatever it was. Probably 7. So, I took it to school. I used it. I didn't collect the lunchbox. Now, if I buy it, I'm collecting it because I don't need it. And again, that's what come in want and need, or even usefulness, because things like the lunchbox were something to use. It wasn't something that I was going to collect and put on my shelf. I used it. So did I consider myself collecting that? No. But if I buy it now because I don't need a lunchbox to go to work, then I'm collecting it. So there is that difference. I think age has a lot to do with it.
Absolutely.
It depends if you're looking back. Sometimes people buy things because they think it's worth something financially. And
see, I think a lot of
course,
I don't. I mean, if I don't have any connection to it, I guess we would know if it was something worthwhile, to have or to sell. But, then you get to sell it, then you have to find someone, and then.
You know what? If somebody offered me 20 Flip Your Wig games for $3 a piece, I'd buy them all and be flipping them.
Well, here's the thing, though. I recently bought something collected.
Uh-oh.
No, it wasn't a lot of money at all. It was like $15. But it took me back to my childhood, a direct moment in childhood, not just the Beatles, but I used to walk with my father to the candy store and then see the magazines and all that, the card store, the candy store, whatever it was, that sold everything. And outside of it, I've told this before on other shows, they had the bubblegum machines, and for a nickel, you get buttons and all that crap. And the Beatle buttons are out there too. But in one of the capsules, there was a little sticker, and it unfolded and had the 4 heads of the Beatles on it. And I always thought of that as a great memory of me and my dad, who's no longer here. And when I saw it come up on eBay, I bought it. I don't even know where it is in my house right now. I probably do, but it has nothing to do with like me needing it. I just wanted it because I wanted a memory of my childhood. So that's a different thing, because if you go and buy, if you played, let's say you played Flip Your Wig when you were 2, 3, 4 years old, and you didn't have it again, but you bought it, or even if you bought a repro of it, that would take you back to your childhood. I think a lot of music does that too. When they release these archive things, I think a lot of us buy it because, number one, it does take us back. We have the music. I mean, we have the American albums. Do we need it on CD? No. But we bought it because we want to have it for whatever reason we did. Are we, because that was a new release, are we a collector of that? No.
Well, but now I think we get into the generational schism. We get into the idea that, for us, when the American albums come out on CD, there's a nostalgia to them.
Absolutely.
So we're going to pick them up and want to go pursue a box set of the Beatles American releases, whereas a 25-year-old Beatles fan is going to look at those as these unique anomalies. And, well, do I need these things? Let's face it, the Beatles CD, the flip over of the canon was 1987. You're going back how many years ago? when the British catalog became
35.
Right. That's the Beatles catalog.
Yep.
So a 30-year-old Beatles collector sees the American
You
albums.
just said the 30-year-old Beatles collector.
The 30-year-old Beatles fan.
Thank you.
You're good call. But the 30-year-old Beatles fan is seeing a release like the Beatles. And I think, are we right in saying that that's where the line now starts to get drawn? Is that 30-year-old fan who's going out to go buy the box set of the American albums? Are they a collector? They're not just a fan of the music. They're going out to buy those anomalies because they're collectors.
Yeah, I understand. I don't understand where you're coming from, but there are two advantages to the American albums which they didn't do for the British. First of all, they put the mono and the stereo on because they could, and that helps you enjoy the records more because you don't have to pay double for it like you had to do for the mono box. And the second thing is, the 2014s, they sort of corrected some of the dual phonics, where the 2004, 2006, they left the dual phonic stuff in there.
Right.
So, but do you count both of them as your, oh my God, I need both? Well, for us, yeah, we have both. I know you guys have it. I know I have it too.
And by the way, for anybody who's not sure, what Rob's talking about are the Capitol albums, which were the two sort of sets that came with, what were they, four albums
CDs each,
4 US albums each, versus the 2014 box set of all of the US albums.
Right. And of course, they made it a little tricky by separating Beatles story. It's like, come on, guys. That's the one I really want on CD because it's never
John Lennon, the chief Beatle.
Anyway. Yeah.
But we have it now, though.
Yeah, I know, but you had to buy the whole box set instead of, I just wouldn't want to just buy the one. I don't need to buy Revolver as part of the mono stereo.
But if you need to hear a Beatles interview from 1964, all of which has information that we all know as fans, and sound bites that you can easily hear on YouTube. But if you need to own Beatles story,
you're a collector.
Hit it. Bingo. Are you a collector?
And that's the thing you just said, Rob. I think you said it perfectly. And you don't even know you said it.
Well, thank you.
No, you said, I didn't, why'd they stop with Beatles story? Because do you need Beatles story? No. But by having it now, you collected it because you, again, like Tony said, it's an interview album. You don't need it. It doesn't do anything in your I'm going to say collection, in your music collection, other than probably just sit.
Right.
So, but you needed it to finish off the set.
It's like
that's a collector.
When I play parts of interview albums, I always say this is something you won't play at a party, but you'll be interested outside of it.
Well, maybe some of your parties because you
not
played the White Album.
No, you've played two versions at some of your parties.
So. Yeah,
that's a great. That's the way you clear them out. But can I wanted to say something. You were talking about the trading cards. In '64, they came out, and I didn't have them, but you have them, Mitch. Yeah. But remember when they put them out in the '80s? That was a new version.
There was a series 4 and 5 that came out as bootleg.
No,
you mean the 90s?
Oh, I guess it was the 90s.
The River Group was 92, and the sports cards, whatever it was called, that was 96.
But think about the attitude towards buying the ones in '64. You're this new fan. Oh, this is something new I can look at. Imprint my memory of their faces from the cards in my mind. And then the ones from the 90s, you're at a different point of your life. You're buying them because you're going to put them in nice plastic sheets, and then you'll put them in a loose leaf binder, and then you'll look at them every.
But I believe even the tagline on the boxes said, "Collect them all."
Yes, well, they say that for a lot of things. So
I understand, but they know we're collecting those cards.
Well, I like both of them.
Did I need the 90s cards? No. I bought the 90s cards because I really thought the pictures were kind of cool.
Yeah, I did too.
They were, and the 96 ones were even better. So I did get it for that reason, and I did read them all, and I did look at them all. So it wasn't like I was, quote, collecting them just to put in a pretty binder to
Sure,
have for
sure.
my kids to sell for $1.
But I'm going to go to this. If you found out that there was a rare one.
No, you know what there were? There were chase sets.
Yeah, of course, but that's where I'm going. So in other words,
yes, I had to have them.
Right. So whenever there is an era of completism.
Oh, that's a good point.
Whenever there's and again, I go back to the music, because we look at that list on 62 to 66 and the list on 67, 70. And let's face it, you were now made aware once you learn the contents of the album, you now started to realize Inner Light, I'm Down, and You Know My Name, Look Up My Number. You needed to have those 3 singles.
And then you listened to You Know My Name and you didn't need it.
Right. No,
you didn't want it.
I love You Know My Name. But
well, I did, but not at the time.
But if you were chasing down those 3 singles,
you're a collector.
Were you a collector? Because you're a completist in any form. So
well, yeah, but some people are completists, but maybe they're not collectors. So
how can you be?
But I know what you're saying, and I'm Down comes out in rock and roll music, and they know it's something people are looking for. It hasn't come out on LP yet.
Perfect.
And then the Rarities album, The Inner Light, and You Know My Name. So they knew about this. There's a couple of things they missed on the Rarities album. The 6 hi-hat open of All My Loving.
But that's
stuff like that.
That's like obsessive completism.
Well,
but you know what? You didn't need to buy any of those albums unless you wanted the true stereo from Real Music of this and that. Unless you wanted like I'm Down and you didn't get it on the 45. Right. Then you're collecting
with the channels reversed.
Yes.
But think about it.
Oh, good.
Capitol starts out with the Red and the Blue albums. Those are 2 of the biggest selling albums of all time. Not just for the Beatles, but for everything.
Yes.
Then they do rock and roll music, which is sort of the same attitude that the Red and the Blue have, but it's it has bad packaging. It had it was okay, but it wasn't. Then they do love songs, which not everything was a love song.
Nope.
And then Rarities made sense, though it wasn't true Rarities. And then Real Music is the epitome of what not to do. And then what happened after Rarities? They said, okay, we're going to start doing something different. Maybe we'll do something called Sessions. And then, of course, that doesn't come out. But at least they had thought about it because they'd reached the end of, I don't want to say ripping people off because that's the wrong thing, but they'd reached the end of how to repackage some of this stuff.
But nowadays, when people find out that Real Music was the first album to have, I think, 4 different true stereos of songs.
Right.
Then they go buy Real Music right now, and that's a collector because you don't have to have the true stereo. You want it. So now but again, with the music, I think I want to get into a little area here where, and Tony, tell me if you don't want me to go here, but I think with music, as we go on and as we get these new archives or ultimate mixes or whatever we get, or the new remixes of Harrison and stuff, and oddly enough, Ringo's the only one not to do this yet, and the Ringo album needs it bad, but we need it bad actually. That one I need to collect. But
no, you're right. You're right.
Music though, as we get older, forget about the 75 different color versions. That is a true collector, because if you have to, and that's the epitome of the word collection, because if you have to have every single version of McCartney 3 because it's red, blue, yellow, green, orange, swirl, and crap, that's a collector, because all you really need is the black vinyl.
But that goes back to something we were talking about too, about the got to have it and want to have it of the older collector.
But even
so,
that's
if you want to have it, if I want to have a white one.
Right.
Because I love white vinyl. I think it looks cool. So I'm going to get 3, but I'm not going to buy the black vinyl one. I'm going to chase down a white vinyl one because that's what I want. I don't need to have all of them.
Well, but if you start buying multiples, which people did, as long as you can buy any color you want. You could buy blue if that's your only color.
Right.
But once you start buying more than one color,
you're a collector.
You don't need that unless there's something on each color that was not on the other album, and that wasn't the case.
Right.
So, and I'm not killing McCartney for this, whatever it is.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that I'm using an example because there was so many different color variations.
But
so
Paul's done that for the last bunch. Paul's done that for the last bunch of records where he has a regular version, then there's a collector's version, then there's a version.
Well, he actually calls it a collector's version.
Yeah, he's doing almost on purpose. I don't think it's for the money. I think it's just for the excitement of collecting, that he knows that many fans will buy something for the collection purpose.
But what I wanted to get into is, as we get older, again, as of this, I just turned 60 a week ago. And why do we look forward to a new remixing or remaster of something we already have?
Well, I want to get there.
Okay.
But I want to detour us for one thing. We've been through, as first generation fans, as someone who started collecting in the very early 70s. Rob started mid 70s becoming a fan. We've been through so many different variations. Did we get to a point along the way anywhere where in the back of our mind we were thinking to ourselves, sucker? Like, did we think like, and also, was there anything that we had buyer's remorse about during the course of that? And that, I think, it'll lead us into the, as we get older and now all the new reissues and things like that and the whys and wherefores. But
I don't think I've ever had buyer's remorse.
So you've never purchased something and then gone home and gone, what the hell did I need that for?
No. I had buyer's remorse on some bootlegs.
Yeah, that's a different story.
Yeah,
but that's a different story because that wasn't an official release. So, and you knew
but that still was
bootlegs would be, risky quality.
Yeah, but that's a fair cop though on Rob's part, I think.
No, but the problem is you start to get a couple of good ones in a row. Yeah. And you start thinking that, they actually start caring. And then all of a sudden you get some piece of crap, which was recorded, the microphone was, 20 miles away and it was in a bottle or something. And that's the problem where, and then bootleg sort of got better in the mid 80s with the BBC stuff and some of the other stuff. But there was some stuff in the early 80s which just, there wasn't a lot of material there and it was just crap.
You got something like 20 by 4 where you got 20 songs and like 9 of them were like, wow, this is really cool. And the other 11 were like, what the hell am I listening to?
Yes, exactly. I've had buyer's remorse with bootlegs.
But that's part of that, as we're saying, that's part of the collecting thing, especially when it comes to the Beatles, because, the Beatles were unique, I think, in the 70s and 80s in terms of the fact that, look, let's face it, once you got to the 80s, everybody was being bootlegged, Zeppelin and Dylan and Elton. But I have to argue. I have to put the argument that Dylan and the Beatles were the big ones in the 70s. So if you were a collector in the 70s, like we were buying the bootlegs, and you were too, Mitch. Pretty,
Yeah. Oh,
I saw your, So, but now, all right. So swinging it toward now.
Yeah.
Or swinging it toward the idea of
Getting
reissues, remasters, expand. And we're skipping over one really major thing when it comes to Beatles and collecting. What happened to our brains when the Anthology series came out? Did that cross, like, did you run after Anthology because you collected the Beatles, or was it strictly because, oh my God, this was new music?
Well, it's new music. You can't call it collecting because it was new.
Right.
Or new variations.
I agree.
I thought the Anthology, I look back at that, I'm like, what happens if they'd released it as a 6-disc box? Not many people would have bought it.
Right.
Well, what if they had released it as 6 individual discs? Disc 1 would have not been bought because there's a lot of low fidelity on some of those tracks, and you have to be a fan to listen to, in spite of all the danger or something.
If it came out first, Rob, and was the first edition, and it came out first as a single disc, a lot of people would not have bought disc 2 or disc 3 or so.
Right. So
you're right about that.
So doing 2 at a time, especially the second disc of volume 1, that starts, and then, the 2 discs of the second one are just, this is so fantastic. And the third one had a lot of solo stuff, what became Beatles stuff. And it's nice to see how it became, but based on sales, everyone bought the first one, but then turned it into their local used record store because they said, "What the hell is this?" And then the second one was kept.
Right.
So, I loved that whole time with the anthologies because it wasn't just the Beatles putting this stuff out in EMI, whatever. A lot of stores picked up on the fact that people were buying Beatles stuff. So, Tower had its own CD. If you bought it there, the Wiz had something. There was what was it? Musicland had a interview disc. If you bought it there, and they're in the Midwest. So everyone had their own connection. You don't see that with any other artists.
I'm gonna
release.
I'm gonna just jump back and ask a question that relates to the older concept of quote collecting. Did any of us purposely pursue multiple formats of Beatles recordings?
No, if I got it for a birthday gift, it was. I never pursued like cassettes.
Okay,
or 8-tracks. No.
I only own cassettes because people have given them to me, or I've gotten them really. Like I have the Traveling Wilburys volumes 1 and 3. I got them from a friend. He was getting rid of stuff. The only time I've cared about multiple formats, if it's like I didn't have the Anthology on vinyl for a while. I do now. I'd like to have Love on vinyl, and I just don't have that.
Right.
And what's the other one?
I think Broad Street.
My other one is a few years ago at the fest when it was still in the swamp. I'm walking around and I see this guy, and he didn't have much on his table, but he had the Real Love 45 and the Free as a Bird 45, and he was selling them for $3 each. And I said to him, "Is that price right?" He goes, "Yeah, I got to get rid of them." I'm like, "Can I buy more than one?" And he goes, "Yes." And I was going to buy the whole damn set because at $3 I could resell them. But then I said, "You know what? I'm not going to resell them because that takes work." So I bought 3 of each. Right. So if I play one, I can have the other 2, and then But that is something I did where I already had the CD. I actually had the cassettes of Free as a Bird and Real Love because they were 49 cents at Tower. They lower the price so they could sell more and get on the Billboard charts.
And we all well, go ahead, Mitch. What were you going to say? I
was going to say, well, first of all, Broad Street, I had to have on CD because it had extended versions, not on the vinyl.
Bonus material.
But also in terms of like the Real Love and Free as a Bird, there was a single that only had 2 songs.
Right.
It didn't have the 4 that were on the CD single.
Right. That's an EP.
That was different. Right. But I want to get back to the Anthology a second, Rob, because you just put something in my head. It was new music at the time.
Yeah.
All right, guys. But every major magazine picked up on the Beatles. The Beatles are back. Forbes had them on the cover. I mean, there must have been 15 different magazines that I collected.
There you go.
Even though the new music was there, I still collected those. Did I read Forbes? No. Did I read the Newsweek? No. They were cool covers. I still have them. I collected it. Did I need them? Nope. I wanted them because you know what? It was the Beatles, and it was so cool to see 15 different magazines in Barnes & Noble or Borders or wherever I bought them, at Walden Books at the time. But literally, it was cool. So I did collect. So that, in terms of the Anthology.
See, that is a collecting.
That's definitely collecting.
And again, if it was 1965 and your little 3-year-old Mitch is in the store and you're pointing to the magazine so your mom can buy them.
But I read those.
You're accruing.
Okay.
I did read all those. I remember reading all the letters to the editor and all the pen pal stuff. I didn't know what the heck I was reading, but
you were accruing, not collecting.
Correct. And but again, let's get back to the age thing, if you don't mind.
Well, hold on. I just want to go back to what you were just saying about the magazine. It's a personal thing. When I saw the Newsweek magazine, The Beatles Are Back, I was in Roosevelt Field and I'm passing a kiosk and I'm walking. I see that, and it's October of 1995. And I saw that and I said, it's time to bring back my Beatles show. And literally, like, it was either a week before or a week after, WHPC bought out WBAU's license that we'd shared with them. So seeing that thing triggered my thought process as to say, you know what? It's time to bring back the Beatles show. Because I've been thinking about it for a long time. But that specific magazine cover,
Interesting.
I see that and I say, it's time to come back. And I called my former program director who is still there. And I said, you know, how do we do this? And, you know, we've been doing it ever since.
What about the idea that, you know, we've seen phases of, for us, again, we were already in it, but 76 saw Beatlemania, the Broadway show. It saw the Bill Sargent.
Well, 77.
77 saw Bill, you know, and Bill Sargent wanting them to reunite, you know, et cetera. And then 1980 was John Lennon's murder. 1995 was, in each of these periods, there were all of that ephemera. You know, there were all sorts of really macabre, the John Lennon period stuff. Then there was the 95 era stuff. So again, that to me, that's collecting.
Yes.
You know, even as macabre as the Lennon stuff was, people were buying those magazines when they came out.
And people were buying the Daily News and the newspapers just to have it on the cover.
Just have the collections.
Right.
But, you know, again, moving ahead now to the idea of all of these things that are coming out, and these, you know, archive boxes and things like that. What do you do with the idea that if we look at it, that this stuff was coming out when we were growing up and we were accruing, not collecting? What do you do with the 15-year-old Beatle fan who now, do they just go out and buy the Sgt. Pepper album? Or does the young person, the 14, 15-year-old person who is starting to become a fan of the Beatles, are they sort of not being automatically thrown into the deep end of collecting? Because you're not going to go out and buy the single album of Sgt. Pepper when you could save up a little more quan or ask mom and dad for your birthday to get the box set.
Yeah,
so but pushing young fans into collecting.
It depends if Spotify has the bonus tracks on Spotify or any other service, because nowadays a 15-year-old kid, you know, you can hear some of these tracks that you have to buy, you know, on the CDs, and say, oh, okay, I have it on Spotify or whatever music service you use.
Yeah.
And that's a little different because you don't have to spend the money.
You could buy the regular remixed album and then listen elsewhere.
Yeah.
So you can have the standard Beatles collection of the albums.
Right.
And still now, so Mitch,
but some of Spotify has the bonus track. Or there are other places like, and this is a whole other show.
Now. All of them have the deluxe editions now.
Yeah. So, and on YouTube, there's the Paul McCartney show at Grand Central, you know, and that's an official release of Paul's that went through YouTube.
Right.
So, you know, and then there's Spotify has the singles that Paul recorded some live show at Abbey Road. And those are only specifically on Spotify. So
okay.
I think it depends on how you collect now as a 15-year-old.
Now, all right. And that leads to what, Mitch, you were starting to talk about.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the age thing only because if they put out Sgt. Pepper, which they did in 17, we were looking forward to it. We wanted to hear remix versions, and we don't need it because, you know, quite frankly, Sgt. Pepper sounds great no matter how it is. It really is. All right. All Beatles do. Yes, they could all use improvement, but back then we weren't thinking it could use improvement in 67 when I heard it. It was great. So it's only with new technology. But as we get older, I look forward to the releases because, like, if there's a Revolver coming out, who knows? But let's assume there is, all right? If a Revolver comes out, it's my favorite Beatle album, so I'll look forward to hearing the remix of it.
Sure.
But, you know, depending on the monetary situation, because when people get older, we have different obligations. You know, we have bills, we have kids, we have wives and families and boyfriends, girlfriends. It's different when we were the 5-year-old and wanted just to hear the music. Now, if we want to spend $150 on an archive edition, you know, do we put food on the table for our family, or do we listen to the Beatles again?
Right.
Again, not just new music. If it's new music you could
The Beatles
justify
again or Hey
spending-
Jude? I mean, I'm sorry.
Oh, stop it.
Sorry.
SW or SO 385.
There you go. And right back at you, babe.
Yeah. But so do I need to hear it again? I'd love to, because I want to hear the freshness of it, because it does take you back to your childhood. But, people our age and older are starting to lose their hearing. It's not like, you do get,
you're right.
it's a real consideration.
You're right.
And do we even notice the difference, the sonic difference of, the remaster? Sometimes you don't, because you get older. Like,
Well, a lot of people listening through their computer, and those speakers aren't the best in the world,
Right.
Right. So that's part of it too. So this new generation that's coming in, unless they're rating their parents' record collection, many are, and now they're rating the CD collection, because there's a whole generation there. So depending on which version they get, they might say, "Oh, that's good enough," or they might say, or they might get in depth like we do and other people listening to the show and say, "Okay, I need that box set of Sgt. Pepper. I need that White Album, because I finally hear the proper length version of Not Guilty instead of that poorly edited version that's on Anthology 3.
So, all right. Okay. Well, I was going to say, I'm going to backpedal that because I'm going to backpedal back to the idea of the box sets, because, I'm not stopping to think about the fact that the young collectors now, it's not confronted with the idea of whether or not you're going to buy the single album Sgt. Pepper or the box set. You're confronted with the idea does the single album that still represents the original mix as the Beatles envisioned it at the time versus the remixes that are in all the archive boxes. Now you've got an idea that, I was thinking that, right, well, you're throwing the kids in the deep end as collectors, but there's still that differentiation. There's still the idea that the kid collecting the Beatles does still have the option to go and get the original albums as they stood versus getting the box.
And the Beatles,
the
Beatles have always had that one album, the original Abbey Road, the original Pepper, as a separate buy. So if you want to get that, it's because it's the original, it's still out there.
Yeah.
And then the two CD set that they put out, starting with Pepper, had the remastered version or remixed version.
Yeah.
And then they had a second disc of outtakes, which sort of matched the first disc. So to me, as a collector, if I wasn't doing the show, that 2-disc set, for financial reasons, covers a lot of bases.
It sure does. Sure.
The only thing is, though,
that's why. No.
The thing is, music versus the ephemera as you get older. Like, the ephemera is nice to have because it brings you happiness and joy. So does the music, and it may take you back, like I said, to a time in your childhood. But Rob, I was talking to you about this offline. Even with my 45s, which I'll get into what we still collect, but even with that, we're getting older. We can't take it with us. Anything.
That's true.
Like, the music, at least you can enjoy. If
I'm gonna try, damn it! I'm gonna try to take it with me.
I'm taking everything in the coffin.
All of it in the
hell.
casket. That's
I'll
true.
need 50 pallbearers and George and John bearers too. But no Ringo bearers.
Tony and I will stop before we put you on the ground and collect everything.
Everybody, just give us a minute with our dear friend Mitch.
Let me say goodbye. Open the coffin and stuff and shit in. Thank you. Look, he's got a 4x4, 4 by the Beatles. Oh my God, I need that. You need that? I got that. But I'll be like, guys, are you kidding? What do you mean? You guys are gonna not? I'm dying before you guys. I'm yours.
You just got to that, Rob.
You just killed me. No, but seriously though, as we get older, like the music you could always enjoy. If I'm on my deathbed and you put the headphones on me, Nancy puts the headphones on me and plays "Help," my favorite song. I some way I'll still enjoy it. But you can't. I'm not going to sit there, when I'm in with my dribble cup in my wheelchair, which is next week. I'm not going to be enjoying the Beatles versus Dave Clark 5 magazine. So ephemera is a little different that way. And, you can't take it with you.
Right.
And even the music, if you have a collection of music that you value and that has value, because some of it doesn't have any value, but if it has value, you can't take it with you. So, and I don't want my kids selling in a garage sale for $1 each. So
I was just saying, my wife has instructions. If something happens to me, she calls you. Both of you. You guys get the phone call.
Yeah, my wife has the instructions not to take your calls.
Yes. Very wise.
No, but I mean, I've told you both, I have set up an Excel spreadsheet with my 45s because I've collected a lot of really rare ones, and I don't want serious. I mean, all kidding aside, I want at least someone to know what they're worth. So when I do leave this, earthly plane, at least, they'll be worth something to someone else, and be able to be sold, if that's the case, for a good price. Because, age does happen, death happens, hearing loss, like I said, but and also space restrictions as you get older. If you're downsizing or if you're whatever, you don't have space anymore for big Beatle posters that I used to have in my room and stuff. And also if I had a man cave, that's a different story. But my wife hates the stuff I put up now. I mean, and it's rare, valuable stuff like Beatles cells and stuff from the cartoons.
And nicely framed. You don't have stuff you're not sticking it up with fun tack.
No. Mine is all professional museum quality, but again, I take up the whole living room, And although I did do a lot of fun tack when I was 15, believe me.
Those greasy spots on the wall.
I didn't even have fun tack. I just did the Scotch tape and then ripped it off. So every poster had one corner, and all the little corners were still on the wall.
On the wall, yeah.
But quite frankly, I don't know what to do. I would love to have stuff now. I would.
Well,
I don't have the space, and I'm getting older. I don't need it.
Well, you've sort of jumped into the next area, but jumped way ahead.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. We're talking about, we were going to go to that idea of what we collect now or if we still collect
and why
we still collect and why we still collect, which is a primary thought. And also too, I mean, it's fine that you were talking about that, Mitch, but you're talking about sort of addressing the idea of those collections down the road,
Well, you have to.
And also too,
we're not 15 anymore.
But isn't it funny though? Here we are saying, well, space is a consideration, and part of that is because as collectors, and there's a big line between collecting and hoarding, but as collectors, we don't cut loose the stuff we had before. So we're talking about the idea that we don't have as much space. Well, these days we all have our own apartments or our own homes or our own. When we were kids and we were collecting, we were in a room, in a house owned by mom and dad.
But you know how much stuff I shoved into that room?
Exactly. But the humorous part of it is, though, now, let's face it, most of what we had when we were young, we still have. So it's been years. I mean, I have to, and what's the word for transparency?
Yeah.
I managed and co-owned record stores. Or had ownership parts in record stores. So for me, a lot of what I got at ridiculously low prices and then was able to resell a large chunk of my collection to finance my master's degree.
That's a different story, yeah.
So that was different. That was knowing that I got some collectible stuff. I have doubles, triples, whatever it is, you cut it loose. But we've now got more living space. But the thing is, the collections are still living there that we had from when we were young.
But where are those collections? Are they in tubs? Are they on the walls? I mean, that's different. See, mine are in tubs, and I sold a lot too, Tony, to finance my kids.
Yeah,
I mean, I sold butcher covers that were gorgeous. Just to, again, if you have to buy diapers,
you bought your kids? Oh, I'm sorry.
I sold my kids. No, but if you have to buy diapers, or look at a butcher cover on the wall. It's a really easy choice when you get older. It's not when you're younger, though, because, if it was like a girlfriend when you're 16, you want to go out with, Sarah or Laura or whatever, or you want to have a butcher cover. I want a butcher cover.
I want a butcher cover.
Yeah, but
then it gets to a certain point and then that flips.
But then we also found out
it does
from Spicer's books that there are a lot more butcher covers than we thought.
Well, that's the other thing.
And the prices went down. Because of that.
Yeah.
It has, but as I got older, again, I did sell off a lot of stuff that I just didn't feel the connection to anymore.
Right.
You just
Yeah.
don't. I mean,
Yeah.
and there's very little right now, other than certain things that take me back and cause me happiness. There's very little that I would seek out because eBay has everything.
Okay.
And
I could
eventually,
easily buy it. 'Cause you have
eventually,
more money
Mitch,
now than you did when you were younger.
True. I was just about
Yeah,
to get to disposable income. Right. Go ahead.
and Mitch,
And that's
you've
the other
talked-
thing I wanted to just say real quick. I always say if I had the money I have right now in my accounts, my bank accounts, versus 64, I'd want to go back to a certain March of 64 and go to Woolworths and record stores and buy everything at that
Right.
price. And then I would resell it now
Right.
and be a billionaire. Seriously.
But you don't think about because who knew the Beatles were going to be the
Well,
Beatles?
that's-
Of course.
Of course, but
Yeah, of course.
But there you just took us back to the very beginning, Rob, because you just said it. Who knew the Beatles would be the Beatles? Well, then are we collectors? Because we didn't know we'd be collecting something valuable.
I'm
We
sure
were
people
just,
collected
like you said,
Dave Clark
accruing
5
to them.
stuff. There's a lot of Dave Clark 5 magazines and other things out there at that time. They were a big time band for 2 years. But no one knew that the Beatles were going to, become the Beatles. You don't know that. You can say that about, New Kids on the Block stuff.
Any group.
Hi, folks. This is Tony from Fab 4 Free For All. As Mitch has mentioned several times, the cast of Fab 4 Free For All do not profit in any way doing these shows for all of you. In fact, we actually lose money because of studio time and other production expenses. Now, we have looked into show sponsors, but for a number of reasons, we've decided it would be in the best interest of all of us, including you, our listeners, not to have sponsored ads in our shows. So, what we've done is set up a Patreon account. Patreon is a crowdfunding platform that allows artists to obtain funding from patrons on a recurring basis. Now, it can be as little or as much as you think you can send to us for the work that we put into providing quality Fab 4 Free-for-All shows. Now, we know that we have thousands of worldwide listeners, and if each of you just contributed $1 a month, that's just 25 cents per episode, we would have enough to retire and not have to do these shows. Sorry. Seriously, though, we've gotten some great feedback from everyone about how much these shows mean to you, and we feel the same way. But it would be nice if we could break even in terms of costs so that we can continue to bring these shows to you in a timely fashion. Yeah, I know, we can be delayed every once in a while, but that's because, as John Lennon so beautifully said, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. But we do vow to make every effort to have a quality show to you every week. We only ask that everyone go and visit patreon.com to at least check out what it's all about and to see if you can contribute a little something in return for all the hard work and effort that we put into these shows for you. Just do a search for Fab 4 Free For All and tell us that you give a buck about what we do. Thanks to all of you for being such great loyal listeners.
All right, so we brought up the Dave Clark 5. Fine. Okay, you got the Dave Clark 5, you got all the Beatles stuff but there's also the idea that now we went into an era where, and we talked a little bit about this, but there are so many pre-made collectibles. We're also talking about not having space. I'm talking about like the Funko dolls, the Beatle dolls, the new generation of Yellow Submarine ephemera, all that sort of stuff. Aside from the music, and everything from colored vinyl jukebox EPs that's going back, jukebox singles that's going back a bunch of years. But now, how does it work as we're older that we have gotten to the point where and we brought this up at the beginning of the show, it's no longer really what we need. It's down to what we want. And that idea of more disposable income. So, Rob, do you see individual things and say, you know what, I want that. I'd like that. I don't want that, but I want that.
I try to look for, being in radio, sometimes we're sent stuff, the radio edits of different stuff. Like Jenny Wren was cut down to 2 minutes or 2:08, which actually I thought helped the song. Sometimes a good radio edit helps. So sometimes it doesn't. Band on the Run was horrible. But it depends. Like I have this thing here. I just got this about, I don't know. It's called Paul McCartney Rocks. Came out in 90. Yep. It was a promo only thing that Capitol put out to commemorate the Paul's tour.
Yes.
And My friend Steve Dassa had this, and he got this when he worked at WHLI. Now, I worked at WHLI at the same time.
But he got there before you did.
He got me there before me. So, because Dean Anthony, I'm sure it was sent to Dean, and Dean just threw it away or something. But this is the only place still to find the 7-inch version, the remade version of Figure of Eight. It wasn't on Paul's box set of Flowers in the Dirt. But it's stuff like this. The 45s from the 70s that had the mono stereo, even though it wasn't a true mono.
Okay.
But still, it's there. That if I see that, I will look to see, first of all, if I need it. Second of all, what's the price? I'll buy, if it's $1 or $2, I'll buy it, even though I already have it.
But are you going to go, and again, I'll get to something that Mitch and I have, dealt with or looked at or what have you. Will we, and Mitch, you may be grabbing something, but don't forget, we're also audio. But are we at the point, or are you at the point, Rob, where are you going on, and I'm just throwing this out, are you going out on Discogs or eBay to look for these?
No.
So if you stumble upon them, you'll get them. So now, Mitch, is he a collector? If he's not going on Discogs, not going on eBay, but if he trips on them, he'll get them. Are you a collector?
Doesn't matter if you trip on it or not, you're still collecting it now. Because
all right, you're just not pursuing it. Pursuing the collection.
But again, sometimes you'll be at a garage sale or a flea market and it's $1. And you're like, I have to get that. Do I want it? No. Do I need it? No, but I have to because it's Beatles and it's $1.
It's $1.
And you buy it. But again, that's definitely a collector. The question you ask is, with disposable income, there are certain things that I want.
Yes.
I don't need them. We have the music. I
Right.
collect the pictures, the U.S. picture sleeves and singles and variations of some of the, the 45s. But I'm having a dilemma now because where do I stop with that? Do I stop when the Beatles cease to exist? Or because after that, they put out promo versions of Got to Get You to My Life. They put out promo of Helter Skelter. Of when they released the singles for the compilation albums, they had promos. Is that a true Beatle promo?
And do you go ahead and get new music that was released on a 45 after the Beatles broke up? Are you going and getting the singles from the singles from Anthology? Are you getting
yes,
new
but that's
variations?
the point. I mean, do you stop at the last albums they put out, like let's just say Anthology, or actually BBC, because there was the Devil in a Heart EP.
Absolutely.
So
right.
the BBC had that.
Maybe it's you. Maybe it's you.
So do you do you stop there? Because even the live on air, the second BBC had a vinyl EP promo, 45, but an EP. So I got it because I'm a collector of the vinyl. But where do you stop? Some people say maybe you should have stopped after Long and Winding Road because that was the last 45 in America that the Beatles put out while they were together. All right, technically. So I don't know where to stop. But as far as disposable income, if I see something I want, I never wanted foreign sleeves. You know this, Tony. Never. Yes, but like there are some that just float my boat.
Yep.
And I want them. So
yeah, I've gotten so bad. I've gotten to the point where there are foreign singles that I really love. I went to go buy one last week.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't get it on eBay. Went through a stack of my singles. I have it already.
Well, that's
but
the
I
other
really
thing.
love that sleeve.
But that's the other reason I put the Excel. The Excel spreadsheet, because sometimes I'll buy something I already had. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I got it. I'm like, wait, I had it?
I had it already.
Like, for instance, I would never, ever have picked this up in the 60s because I don't live in Greece. But I would never have picked this up. Look at this. That's gorgeous, right?
Well, and for our audio folks, they are multicolored Greek singles on Parlophone, Purple Label Parlophone. And Mitch, you started pursuing those, and they're absolutely gorgeous.
Those originals.
Those are those
originals.
These are originals from the time. Yeah.
Okay.
Because look, it comes with the Parlophone sleeve.
Oh, okay.
The old Parlophone sleeve. So, do I need this?
And the other thing you've had fun collecting is you've
had $300.
Right.
But and you know what? This will be the first thing my kids will sell for $1. But I
So Tony and Rob will be there first day.
But I have 2 of them now. There's like 15 of them. I'm never going to buy 15. But I wanted at least one of them because I wanted it. I didn't need it.
So has age allowed us to become, do I want to say, connoisseurs versus collectors?
That's a good
We're
point.
no longer completists. You don't need all 15 of those.
No.
You're not running around. You're not losing sleep because you don't have the other 13.
No, but you know what? If one comes up for $75,
of course
I'll buy it. Because you gotta.
Yeah.
But
all right. So I'm gonna throw this.
There's 2 parts to it. There's actually 2 parts. Is how bad do you want it, and how much money is it? And if it's cheap enough, you might want it a little more than if it was more expensive. So I think that's part of it too.
Single I just saw, Rob, from Columbia, Yellow Submarine from Columbia. It looks like the cover of a 16 magazine.
Okay, Columbia meaning the country.
Columbia, the country.
Okay.
They drew the Yellow Submarine and the bodies, and then they stuck the Beatles' real heads on it, and it looks like 16 magazine.
And mind you, it's from the Revolver era, so it's not the true Yellow Submarine from the movie image. It's a completely different drawn image, right?
It's it's a cool EP with weird songs on it. I mean, really, I wanted it. It was $300. It usually goes for $800.
Wow.
I missed out on it because I told the guy I'm going to just wait another day because I was hoping to get birthday money to buy it, but I missed out on it. Do I care right now? No.
I got obsessed.
$300. I'm sorry. I could feed my kids.
I got obsessed with the Mexican EPs because John put the song list together of those in 1971 when the Mexican EPs were going to come out. And Alan Klein asked John to put some track lists together for the EPs. They came out, and whether they're the originals from 71 or the reissues from the late 70s, whatever. But I wanted them since I was a kid. I passed them up when I was little for $4 a piece, like an idiot. But now, they go for $25, $30 a pop. But I was able to find like 12 of them for, like $100. Yeah. And including shipping, So did I go ahead and get those because now I could complete the whole set for only X amount more? Yeah, I did. But I'm going to throw this out there too, and then we'll get ready to start to wrap up. But what did the internet and eBay? I mean, look, let's face it. When we were young, if you collected, you had Beatle Fest, which became Fest for Beatle fans. You had your local record stores, and you had, Rob, as you pointed out, the back of Rolling Stone magazine, where you could hook up with some collectors. Yes. When I was a little kid, I had a friend who I traded comic books and records with. Shout out to Rob. And we would trade comics and we would trade records. I had this Beatle record he didn't have. He had this Who record I didn't have. And but now comes the internet. We're older kids now. Don't forget, anybody growing up as a Beatles collector, they've now got Discogs, eBay. And granted, you still got thrift shops and record shows and stuff. But for us, because we were much more mature when that started to happen, what, if anything, did that do to the sense of collecting?
I think it gave us a chance to be, as you said, connoisseurs, to pick and choose what we want. It gave a lot of people a chance to be completists, because now if you're trying to find that Yellow Submarine or Strawberry Fields picture sleeve, when you went into a store and you saw one, if it was in bad shape, you're like, oh, I don't want it, but I may have to buy it because it might complete my collection. Now you can find 40 of them on eBay, and you have your choice to buy it or not. I think it gives you a lot of options. But, again, going back to your Mexican EPs real quick, some of those were cool because they did different things. John did different things. He did like 4 or 5 different EPs of just George's songs.
Yep.
So there were a couple that are just Ringo songs.
Yep.
So those are different. But I think with the internet, it definitely gave us, it essentially put the Fest for Beatle fans marketplace out of business, because
it's when you go there, you still find things, but it's not what it used to be.
No.
Right. Like I said, I found those Free as a Bird and Real Love singles because the guy was looking to get rid of them. So, but you're right. The marketplace is not what it used to be.
You could, whereas a butcher cover in the marketplace might be $1,000, you could go on eBay and find them for, 4, 5, 6, 700 now.
Yeah.
And obviously you're going to do that. So it gives you options, I think. That's all. Whether you want to be a connoisseur and just collect that one piece that you say will take you back to the bubblegum store, like with your dad, like me, or because I would never have found that elsewhere. All right. But it also gives you the choice to be a completist if that's what you want to do. Because I know people on the internet, on the Beatle collectors group on Facebook, that have 40 different versions of Revolver. They want the small print, the fat print, the this print, to that print, from Jacksonville, from whichever Winchester pressing, and it gets crazy. It does.
Well, that's why Bruce Spicer did his books.
Well, yeah, but that's the other thing, though. The internet can drive you nuts because you can see everything you want. If you really want something, you will find it. But the question is, do you want to pay?
And you can learn about things that you already have, or that
absolutely.
I was recently given a copy of Yesterday and Today, and researching it, I realized that it's one of a handful of pressings of Yesterday and Today where every track is true stereo. I didn't know that. It was given to me,
Right.
And now it became something where, as a collector, connoisseur, I'm going, I like this. This is unique. This is odd. Not everybody knows about this. This isn't the butcher cover. No, it's not worth nearly as much money, but this is something fun where it almost becomes a curio. You can hold up that Greek single to the most hardcore of hardcore Beatle fans, and unless they know about the niche, they're going to go, oh, Jesus, what the hell is that? And
Right.
like Rob said, hey, is that from the time?
Right.
So we get into that idea now of, it's conversation pieces. I'm looking, and I have multiple copies of the Let It Be box set. A few of those have to go. I'm going to hold on to the one, but as a collector, they have to be sold, mind you.
Oh, they have to be sold. I thought gifting was going to be.
I'm just going to be giving them away.
No, I mean, I paid good money for them.
Yeah,
But
I
I'm going to
know.
send Tony a bunch of Oreos, so maybe he'll go before us.
Very good. Fried Oreos. With buttermilk.
Hello, Winnie. It's Rob and Mitch.
Yeah, very nice.
Just wanted to say we love you.
But yeah, I mean, it's that idea that, as a collector, I saw over time, I saw 3 of them all at good prices. And like you said, somebody said before, good price, got to have it. It was a good price, got to have it. Wasn't a great price. Maybe they were worth $350 and I only paid $175. But that's $175. Now, 10, 15 years later, I'm sitting there going, I don't need these. I don't need 3 of them. Rob Leonard got so excited, he just disappeared on us when we started. Anyway, but so anyway,
Tony,
that's
to your point, Tony, this Greek single I have,
right.
you said it's a curio, a museum piece. Not a museum piece. You said it was something
Conversation
to look at.
piece.
Conversation piece. Thank you.
Yeah.
But who am I conversing with?
Well, you talk to us, don't you?
No, I do.
And you're talking to thousands of people online right now.
This single, I hate to say it, but this single is going back in the box. So it's not like it's out in the open, like all colorful, reflecting off the light. So people come in the house and they go, what the hell is that? And you start talking about it. It's going right back in my 45
You
box.
should hang it from a string in the middle of the living room.
Yeah, right. It'll be a little disco ball. No, but what I'm saying is, how can it be a conversation? If you have a butcher cover, because my butcher cover, I had professionally peeled, and I took the peeled, because they give you the peel perfectly. They do it with tape, so you could have the full peel slick. So I framed that with the copy of the recall letter and the butcher cover. All right. Sold it for an enormous amount of money at the time when my kids were born. But that I hung up in my house, and people come in and then they go, what the hell is that? And then you can converse.
Right.
Stuff like this. No one's coming up to me and going, do you have a Beatles single that like is, marble colored? No. I mean,
of course.
It's tough because sometimes you have remorse. Like, I could have used this $300 on something that we really need. But sometimes you say to yourself, you know what? It's your birthday. It's your fun day.
But
I need to have that.
And again, that's that idea that, to the best of my knowledge, and this is, It's the collector justification at work. None of us are running around snorting copious amounts of cocaine. We're not,
Not yet.
None of us have serious gambling problems. None of us,
Not yet.
who won at the fifth race?
Although New York just got all the
New York
gambling
just only
apps, so
online gambling. Yeah. So our lives are over.
next
But, no,
time.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But seriously though, so we're, as adults, we are permitted our small vices. We are
Yes.
permitted that, and hey, look, not to take away. And again, we don't mean any, there are folks out there that, $300 is the
It's
world.
a lot. Yeah.
And so by all means, my God, we're not,
I'm not taking it
we are
lightly.
very fortunate, right? We don't take it lightly. We're very, very fortunate that we have the capability to do that.
Yep.
Very fortunate. And
But by the way, one thing that bothers me when I go into a certain thrift stores, there are people there who will look it up on eBay right away to see if it's worth anything. And a lot of times they buy stuff they have no interest in as a collector, but they're buying it as a business thing. And
what's wrong with that, though, Rob? That's what's wrong with that. That's
no, but the problem is that you're right. It is the free market, but the problem is that people think that just because it went for $100 on eBay, that it's worth $100, where maybe it's actually worth $20, but someone got in a bidding war because they desperately wanted it.
Oh,
You know
absolutely.
what, Rob, the opposite to me is if the thrift store, which they do this, if the thrift store sees the word Beatles on it, they throw a $50 price on it and it's worth $3.
I've been in that store too, and I actually went to the manager. I said, you know what, that Beatles thing is not worth $100. And they're like, oh, well, it's the Beatles. I go, yeah, but look at the beat up cover. It looks like someone ran it over. And
but it's weird because we're talking about what we collect and why we still collect. So obviously I have the connection to the cartoons because of the book.
Right.
And I went and sought out Beatle cartoon cells, right? And any series memorabilia that is not mass produced. So you can't buy cells anywhere because they're not mass produced. So whenever I found them, they've cost me a lot, but they're worth a lot. And they're hanging up. But as I've gotten older, I'm saying to myself, all right, that painting of a Beatle in the frame is worth $3,500. That's a car to some people. And I'm thinking to myself, I have 2 kids in college. Yeah. Do I need to have that cell anymore? It served my purpose.
That's a good
but
point.
Do I need to have that anymore? So people are asking me, will you sell it? And I'm thinking, maybe I will, because it's thousands of dollars back,
Right.
and it'll also justify me getting some more Greek singles. No,
but that's true though. That's the connoisseur aspect, and that's what art collectors do, though, Mitch. Art collectors will, and I got to tell you, I'm doing the same thing. I'm selling off some CDs, I'm selling off some ephemera, and I've said to my wife, to Winnie, I try to let my collection at this point pay for itself.
Right.
I try to sell the things that I don't love anymore, or don't, or maybe bought to be a completist. And now I just don't have that feeling anymore. I want to be a connoisseur.
Right.
I'd rather have something I love and think is really cool and sell off bits of a collection that I say, well, I only got that because I was being a completist.
I want to ask Mitch a question. Remember when they put out the Beatles singles collection a couple of years ago, and they took sleeves from around the country?
Yes.
To me, I got a little more interested in the foreign pressings if they had a good cover. And we did a show on it too. But I'm wondering, did you say, well, maybe I should start collecting other countries?
No, what? Not because of that. I had seen prior to that on eBay, again, just because insomnia and a debit card are not good. But I'm on eBay a lot at 3 a.m. and I'm flipping through all the pages. You're not just putting in like Beatles 45. You just put in Beatles and it comes up. And a bunch of stuff catches your fancy, catches your eye. And you're like, what is that? I've never seen that. So there were a couple of 45s from Italy that just had unique pictures sleeves that I went, I have to have that. So, and then I went on Discogs and pursued it that way.
Right.
But then when the Beatles singles came out, I almost thought it was cheapening the old ones. Even I thought it was a great box. Don't get me wrong. But now people were selling those on eBay for $10.
Right.
They broke up the box, and I could buy that one like the one of, we talked about it, but the one of Come Together, I believe, or something from Poland or Israel sells for like $575 on eBay. And now, you can get the renewed,
Right.
the new one for
Right.
$10. So, yes, I would like to have that because I'm not gonna pay $575 for the other one. But it was a cool concept. I think what they need to do is more of that. I think they need to put out like a US singles box with all the picture sleeves.
Yeah, that'd be great.
The UK didn't have singles, so they didn't, they couldn't do that. But they could certainly do more.
Well, they made it up in the 90s and the 80s when they put out the EP vinyl and then
I don't want that.
But I'm going to quickly turn before we say fairly well.
Yep.
What we've done then is now it's this idea of, and I go back to as a comic book collector, the death of Superman, when, they put it out and literally you have to buy the death of Superman. It's going to be a collectible.
Right.
Well,
Right.
They as opposed to every regular run of every issue where they ran 600,000 copies of the comic, they ran 3 million of Death of Superman. So that collectible that I probably paid $2 for at the time is worth
$2.
$1.
Right.
Well,
they do that with baseball cards now too.
And the truth is, the thing about the Beatle, the Beatle world, they are still doing to a degree. Some stuff has limited runs, which because the Beatle collector circle doesn't really shrink that much. The next generation.
Well, McCartney 3 was all limited for so much.
McCartney 3 was all limited, but again, time is going to tell whether or not 3 or 4 years from now, those are going to be going for next to nothing. Or
well, you can get them on eBay now for about what you bought them for.
Right. So the truth is we're going to start seeing, the Beatles singles box. And, already there were a few box sets that came out that were, the next level of collecting where we got them 5 or 6 months later. Even right now, the Let It Be box set is going for less than it originally went for, in some, in some circles. So in that respect, collecting has changed.
But
and I think
memorabilia in general has kept its value.
Yep, for the most part, it has.
And most part has gone up, or at least kept its high value above what the selling price was original.
Yes. Well, the next step is to go to the actual auctions, like at Sotheby's or Julian.
Well, yeah.
And what was the one I wanted? Of course, I couldn't afford it. But when Astrid Kircher's photos went up for sale, they're ready to sell them, and then guess who came in and bought them all?
Right.
Apple.
Right.
That's like the next step up when you have lots of money and lots of time and people to research the stuff for you because you're too busy making all this money so you can buy the stuff.
Go ahead, Vert. Sorry, Rob.
So that's like a upper level collector. He's got it. It's like in when Ringo was a host of Saturday Night Live and an actual Beatle.
An actual Beatle.
And
did he know
sell.
Paul?
You're right. He didn't sell.
But there was that question. Did he know Paul? Did he actually?
But I don't like when I honestly, and then I'll wrap up by saying this. I don't like when they create a collectible. I don't.
Agree with you.
I find that it's almost appalling to me. Like when they say, here's a project turntable from with the 1964 Beatles on it, and it's on there's only or I'm sorry, they just did a new one as of this taping for Spotify where they did it's called a Get Back turntable. There's only 1,500 of them, and it's $200. Again, I don't need that. It's a Crosley.
Well, I was going to say not project. We got to specify.
No, it's a Crosley. 1,500 only, but they tell you that there's only 1,500. Go buy it now.
But
they're
meanwhile,
eating the collectible,
and you're still getting a, not so hot turntable. No,
in some people's opinions, right?
Most folks in some people's opinion, as someone who listens to audiophile records, that's not something to listen to.
But there are listeners of ours that have bought every Crosley Beatles table that came out, and
that's their niche. That's their niche.
Right.
Again, it's that idea of it's a joke of just because you're a connoisseur doesn't mean
It has to be high end.
It has to be high end. You're buying what you love. It's you could be a connoisseur of.
Listen, I could be a connoisseur of paper clips.
Right.
And you know what?
Yeah.
Because he used to pick my teeth with them.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. But I mean, if that's what it is, you buy a box of those for $2.
Right.
It doesn't have to be high end stuff.
Right. Right.
Or it can be all high end stuff, depending on your disposal.
Well, think about that person who was collecting White albums and had a store in the city.
There's 2,500 of them.
Yeah, and he was looking for ones with numbers, but he bought ones without numbers too. So that's a weird collection. That's a different collection. If they didn't have the number thing, would you even care? That's the thing. And
well, what he cares about is he says they have stories. He loves ones that are written on.
Right. Yeah, and that's true because it was a white piece of paper basically.
Right. It was a clean canvas.
Yeah, and people wrote "This is mine" or they wrote their names on it.
Or they drew pictures of the Beatles or whatever. Yeah.
I bought a record once. It was 461 Ocean Boulevard, and it was a Christmas present, and it said 12/25/79, and it said, "Dear so and so, I love you. Merry Christmas." And it's on the front of the cover. And I bought it. It was $1, but I bought it for that. I have the record, but I bought it because someone wrote that little note on there.
And if you ever
find out the name and wrote Rob.
No, if you ever find somebody named so-and-so, he's got an automatic gift for them.
No, but he just wanted someone to say, "Dear Rob, I love you."
I did say Rob, that's why. But it's like, sometimes you go to weddings and they give out CDs and then you find them in the thrift stores. Right. And you often wonder, like, is this couple still together? And then you look at the song tracks, like the song listing, like, boy, this is a horrible listing. Yeah. What the hell are they thinking?
REM, One I Love? Wait a minute, that's not a wedding song. Anyway, all right. On that note, and very quickly, the other thing, we're not even going to go into it, but let's face it too, aside from eBay and whatnot, Rob brought it up, things like Spotify and Apple Music. That has changed the face of collecting for music people.
Right.
And it is that difference of having to have the actual physical unit, which I know, Rob, you're a fan of. I've said it's gotten to a point now where if the Beatles turned around tomorrow and said, we're making every outtake the Beatles ever did available only in a digital format, lossless, but only digital, I would be just as happy if it never came out in solid form. I've gotten to that point.
Right.
Others of us as collectors, it's got to be in that solid form or we're just not happy, which I get. It's our generation.
Well, also, there would be
an LP of the Rooftop.
One more time, you guys both talking the exact same.
Sorry,
Rob, what were you saying?
No, I was going to say that some people would then, if that were to happen, which isn't a bad idea, but if that were to happen, I could see people making covers and making, like the
covers,
the 63 bootleg thing that came out. That was had someone came out with some covers for that. So.
What were you going to say, Mitch?
No,
I was going to say I would love to see a 12-inch version of the Get Back Rooftop performance, because it has a cool cover.
Sure.
So I don't like the cover they use where
I get it
from the back and it doesn't look like John's body.
It's Neil Innes. Anyway, all right. So on that note, that this has been us from Fab 4 Free For All. We were talking about collecting and the history of our personal collections and how it has changed over the years and what collecting is like now. I just want to mention two more things that I've gotten because as a collector and being in the radio business, there was a Love CD that was a 4-track sampler that actually has opens and closes. It doesn't all fade into everything. That's really cool. And then there was one when Help was released on DVD, Capitol put out a 7-track CD sampler, which is basically all the songs in the movie. Mm-hmm. That was very cool. That is like promo copy stuff, and wasn't available anywhere else. So I like that a lot, and that's the type of stuff that I collect. If anyone wants to send it to me because they've ran out of space.
What are you, Soupy Sales? Just send $1 too.
No, I didn't say $1.
just send us a. And if you have any butcher covers lying around and you'd like to send those to us, they're the ones with the babies and the meat, and it's really ugly to look at. You don't want it
my
in your
eyes
house.
burn when I see it.
Yeah, so send it to Fab4 Free for All.
And all you people in Greece, send me your singles.
Oh, everybody in Greece, send Mitch your
Send him.
Send him your comb. Send him your.
I don't need a comb.
Anyway.
I don't have enough.
All
hair.
right. So for Fab4 Free for All, I've been your moderator, Tony Triguardo. Joining me as always is. Go ahead. To my
Mitch
left.
Axelrod
Rob Leonard.
and Mitch Axelrod. Good night, folks.
And good night, folks. We'll see you all soon.
Fab4 Free for All was edited and produced by Tony Triguardo at Word of Mouth Studios in Westbury, New York.
The opening and closing theme is My Dolly by the band The Badge, featuring longtime listener Jeff Slate, available on its debut album Digital Retro and recent Best Of compilation, as well as from the Fab4 Free for All website.
Thanks for listening to Fab4 Free for All.